Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Friday. Or, I don't know, Fraggoth Reads? Yeah, Fraggoth Reads still. So this week we're starting, I've been gone for a little while, so we are starting a new literary endeavor in the form of Red Noise by one John P. Murphy. I forgot that there was a map image in one of the first couple pages, so I will have to get that at some separate date. I will endeavor to do that. So yeah, welcome back. I'm sorry for the long departure, but we are back and with a vengeance. So chapters are not numbered. They are titled. Each chapter has a title. Some of them are like less than a page long. It is difficult to describe this book without giving things that could potentially be spoilers. So I will read the first paragraph of the back of the book description. Broke and out of fuel, a Wildcat asteroid miner comes to Station 35, looking to sell her cargo and get back to the life of solitude that she craves. Instead, the cheating thieves who run the place leave her deep in debt. I'm not going to read the rest of it because that starts, that gets us places. Let's put it that way. The description I would give it is one that would be even more spoilerific, so I'm not going to do that till we're a ways in. Suffice it to say, I had read this one. When was this published? I didn't read it until a couple years afterwards. Yeah, I didn't read this until like 2 years ago, I think, maybe less. It got published first in 2020. I had it on my shelf for a while before getting around to it. Actually wound up accidentally picking up a second copy because the description sounded so good and didn't realize I had it. And then was like, oh no, I've got to return this. This happens occasionally, not often, but it does happen. Anyway, I'll, any similarities you see between this and certain black and white movies involving swords and maybe rice paddies and possibly a mining town are in no way accidental. I'll also note that the book is dedicated to, quote, to everyone who just wants to be left alone. Real. All right, so without further ado, I've got some water here somewhere. Yeah, that's fluid shaped. Let's get crack-a-lackin'. Red not. Whoa! Pushing all the wrong buttons today. I leave for 2 weeks and I don't remember my hotkey layout. Smart. Red Noise by John P. Murphy. The Miner. Station 35 was a dot on the nav screen. It meant ore buyers and fuel sellers, necessary transactions, and unwelcome human contact.
The miner needed the first and dreaded the second, but cash meant freedom, and she couldn't eat rock. So she set her course, made sure her dwindling fuel would get her there, and then thought no more about it. She laid eyes on Station 35 a week later, loaded with ore and low on everything. It was big and ugly and damn near deserted. She met one of its inhabitants in orbit, a vacuum-mummified corpse tethered to an orbital path marker and clutching a sign that read, "No firearms. We mean it." So it was that kind of place, then. She'd been waiting patiently in a holding orbit for 5 hours, listening for the okay to dock. At least, she'd waited as patiently as anyone could as her fuel burned down below the 1% mark, past the point where the engineers who'd built her spacecraft expected any sane person would still be operating it. The station crew knew she was there. They'd scanned her half a dozen times. They just hadn't given the okay. Or signaled why they wouldn't. Or said anything at all. She tapped her fingers on the pilot's console, had the computer run another radio equipment diagnostic, cranked down the gravity and temperature control a little more, and that all still counted as patient, in her opinion. There had been plenty of opportunities for her to curse herself over the fuel squeeze, and she'd made use of them efficiently on the long trip from her claim. Even with a hold full of asteroidal nickel iron to sell, it had been so easy to stay one more day, and then another. No people in a million clicks. Just silence and work, her plants and her books. She'd stayed too long, and then she was low on fuel, low on water, low on cash to pay her claim fees. Another week, and the government would seize it for non-payment. Of course, long before then, the fuel would run out, and when the life support, power, and grav plating all ground to a halt in turn, she'd asphyxiate, floating in the dark. The station looked abandoned. It was a big, gray, monstrous thing, chunky and ugly. Burrowed into the side of an asteroid, it looked like a giant spider clutching its bloated egg sac. The big round hab complex had a set of windows that glowed with a venomous green light that flickered red. It had been military once. Most of them had. All along its gray steel skin, wherever some rating with a paint nozzle had found room, it bore the number 35 at all angles and configurations, except for the one spot with a 53. Converted to commercial use, someone had at least been bright enough to remove the great big sub-sea cannons, leaving flat round patches where the emplacement had once wielded armament capable of flinging mass hard and fast enough to obliterate even the best armored cruiser. There were probably still some junky little lasers for zapping trash and other projectiles, but she couldn't see them from so far out. The comm light blinked, and she slapped it before she could register that it wasn't the dockmaster. A big round face filled the small comm screen. Unshaven and with a swollen red nose that had been broken for him pretty thoroughly, leaving bruises rimming bloodshot eyes. "Mining ship Cincinnatus," she said automatically. It was redundant, since he could see her identifier on his screen just as clearly as she could see transport ship Cassandra below his beat-up face. She just didn't feel like saying hi.
"Hey," said the trucker, his voice muffled for obvious reasons. "Glad I caught you. You ain't aimed to dock here, are you?" She bit back a remark proposing an alternate reason she might have sat in a docking orbit for 5 hours. "I am?" He was already shaking his head. "I'd push on to the next station if I were you. Ain't far to 36.
"What's the matter? Is the place abandoned?" She felt her hand tighten involuntarily on the armrest. There might be fuel and water in an abandoned station, and there might not, but there wouldn't be money to pay the patch fees.
"Might as well be. Anyone decent up and left this a long time ago. All that's left is the assholes who did this."
His hand flicked into view to indicate his broken nose. She glanced at the ad beacon, which still offered ore buying as a station service. She frowned. "They still buying ore and selling supplies?" He blinked like she'd flicked him in the face.
"Yeah, I guess. The provisioner's open anyway."
Her shoulders released some of their tension, and she sat back in the pilot's chair. "Then I'll be fine, thanks." When it looked like he was about to say something, she interrupted. Is there something wrong with the port? Almost all the berths are open, but I've been waiting for the clear to dock for hours. I'm going to say that where I don't stumble over the sentence. Almost all the berths are open, but I've been waiting for the clear to dock for hours. He shook his head.
Portmaster's crooked as hell, probably playing chicken. He got me with a 200 credit fine for docking without permission when I thought my radio was busted.
She winced.
Listen,
He said.
this place is bad news.
She sighed, hopefully not too obviously. People. Thanks for the concern, but I don't have the food or fuel to make it to 36. I'll keep my eyes open, don't worry. He looked skeptical.
Hell, if it's fuel you need, I can spot you some. I'm about at the last marker buoy. I can stick around.
No thanks, she said, and tried to make it sound polite. There was no way. Either she'd have to kill a would-be pirate using fuel as bait, or worse, she'd be in debt to a stranger.
I just don't want blood on my conscience.
If there's blood, it won't be mine. They stared at each other until he looked away.
Your call. Just keep an eye out for their welcoming committee. Goddamn little shits.
Will do. The faint memory of manners tugged at her conscience. Thanks for the warning. Safe flight.
Safe flight.
He nodded, and the picture blinked out. The miner rubbed her face with both hands and glared at the comm system, which still showed her dock request pending. Ship, auto-accept dock permission, she said aloud. Notify me immediately. Okay, boss. The ship computer's chipper voice replied, and she was up and out of her chair. She went to the plant room, the bunk she'd converted. 2 plastic shelves of orchids and another with 3 bonsai trees filled the small space with a heady, earthy atmosphere. She closed her eyes and breathed it in. It was warm and humid with the ship's cooling systems cranked down to save power. It felt nice, even as a trickle of sweat crept down her neck. The hatch closed behind her, leaving her in the dim light of plant room night. She was so far out of daytime sync with them it wasn't even funny, but she didn't mind. She couldn't make out greens and purples and pinks in the low light, but she knew they were there. That was the point. Wherever she was, whatever she was doing, she knew they were there. She had a center. Hey, boss, the fuel level is down to 0.5%. You instructed me to... I know, she interrupted, and then swore. 200 credits was a lot of money to her just then. Her whole cargo would only go for maybe 35 grand. But a tow could be much more expensive, assuming they even had a working tugboat. She pulled the hatch open and stepped into the upper corridor of her small ship, glanced into the opposite hatch, and thought again about selling her service rifle that hung uselessly above her bunk. She couldn't fire it on board without risking a hull breach. She couldn't I just read that. There was really no point to keeping it, nor the sword that hung beneath it, or any of the other mementos. Docking permission accepted, boss. The miner snapped out of her musings. It took some doing to maneuver her heavily loaded ship, but she wrestled it around to its final approach. Then she collapsed in her seat, feeling the weight of the last few sleepless nights and the stress of the low fuel gauge. A half-empty station wasn't so bad, in some ways. Oh, ideal, if I... Okay. I didn't think I'd be having a rough time this early. We'll get into it. A half-empty station wasn't so bad. Ideal, in some ways. Sell the ore, pay the debt, don't attract attention, get the hell out of there. No problem. The Welcoming Committee. Screwball and Ditz stood outside the main port hatch, feeling exposed and foolish. At least, Screwball did. He stuffed his hands in his pockets to grip the brass knuckles he'd had printed, glad for their reassuring weight. Shithead Preston, taking his best pistol away. He leaned against the wall under the big welcome sign and glared at Ditz, who was waving his hands around like some kung fu shit and saying, "Ha!" and "Wah!" and otherwise living up to his nickname. "What the fuck are you doing?" He finally got fed up and embarrassed enough to ask. "Getting my head in the game, screwy man. Psyching my fine self up. Hooah!" Ditz flailed his leg up in a way Screwball figured was meant to be a high kick. "You're gonna hurt yourself." Ditz spun with his fist up suddenly, and Screwball froze as that fist came to a halt right in front of his nose. The rings on Ditz's jacket jangled loudly, and their eyes met. Ditz's pupils were blown. "In the game," Ditz whispered, staring into his eyes. His wet breath stank. He turned after a long, silent moment and started flailing again. "I knew you weren't going to hit me," Screwball lied. "Uh-huh." "Huh!" Ditz punched the air hard, lunging like with one of those skinny fencing swords. "How long does it take to dock a stupid spaceship, anyway?" "You gotta scan it first," Ditz said matter-of-factly, not looking at him. "Checking for you-know-who. Make sure the old man doesn't sneak him back." "Nah," Screwball said. "Nuke's dead. He's gotta be." "Says you. Anyway, Preston looks for contraband and shit, though." "So we can take a cut, you mean, or see if there's anything worth stealing?" Screwball still felt sore about losing his gun, not just feeling defenseless. That was an expensive pistol, and it ate him to think of that scrawny asshole hoarding it or selling it. This place was supposed to be a fucking gold mine for a guy who wasn't afraid of a fight, but instead he just got stolen from and paid shit and made to hang out and try to recruit anyone else dumb enough to dock at the universe's asshole. Ditz punched the air one more time, then turned and shrugged. He was breathing hard. "I don't tell the old man how to run his shit." Screwball spun to see where Ditz was looking, at a tall, good-looking dude with a shaved head and an easy grin, almost a leer. He squinted before realizing that the bald head wasn't painted at the temples, but gene-modded with some sick-looking scales, all shimmery in the light. He took his hands out of his pockets and folded his arms, intending to look tough, but forgetting the brass knuckles. "The fuck are you?" he managed. "The fuck am I?" The bald guy turned to a bony chick who Screwball didn't know either. "I don't know. Shit, Ditz, who the fuck am I?" If the bald guy wasn't intimidated, that worthless jerk Ditz sure was. He ran his hand over his yellow-dyed hair. "Come on, Raj, he's new. He doesn't mean anything." "Well, I guess I'm Raj then, brother," the bald guy said to Screwball. "So if I'm Raj, then who the fuck?" Screwball backed into the wall, and Raj poked him hard in the chest. "Are you?" Screwball resisted the urge to rub his sore sternum. "I'm the guy who's asking who the fuck you are." Raj stared hard at him. His breath stank, too. "Never mind. I think if I knew your name, I'd lose an IQ point." The girl behind him laughed. He stepped back and lazily waved a hand. "Push off, brothers. I have work to do." Ditz gave Screwball a worried look. "Hey, Raj, sorry for the disrespect and all. You know I like you, man, but they agreed, dude. This is Feeney's patch. We're the welcoming committee, right?" "No arrangement," Raj said. He folded his arms and looked pleased with himself while his pal leaned against the wall where Screwball had been, looking pleased with herself, too. "What new arrangement?" Screwball was getting pissed off. He'd been promised money, drugs, and ass when he came to this godforsaken station, and all he'd gotten was a lot of bullshit. Raj uncrossed his arms, gave Screwball an appraising look, then punched him right in the face. Screwball staggered at the sudden stinging pain and flailed his arms out. Adrenaline and shock fought, and for a moment all he saw was red. "The new arrangement, my brother, is I punch you until you fuck off, savvy?" That's a question mark. "The new arrangement, my brother, is I punch you until you fuck off, savvy?" Screwball's rage pushed him through the fog, and he fumbled in his pocket for his knuckles, twisted in the lining. Raj stepped neatly and dealt him a second rabbit punch, and he reeled. Ditz was gone. Blood streamed hot down his face, and his shirt felt warm. He swung at Raj, but, angry and pain-muddled, only managed to slap, barely catching the guy's chin. "Shit!" Raj rubbed his face with his fingers. "If you get blood on me, I'll kill you." Screwball hadn't been watching Raj's pal, and he realized his oversight when she elbowed him in the side of the head. He hit the far bulkhead and saw stars, while she reeled off balance. The thought, 2-on-1, made it through his skull to part of his brain that could do some good. Oh, I see. I misread that in my head. The thought, 2-on-1, made it through his skull to part of his brain that could do some good, and he fumbled to back away. They let him go, which he counted as a miracle. Distracted when the hatch to the dock made a noise, they left themselves open for Screwball to hurl his brass knuckles at Raj's head. "Welcome to Station 35!" he yelled at the opening hatch, breaking into a run and technically fulfilling his role as welcoming committee, if not the point. "Hope you like assholes!" He laughed his head off as a pissed-off Raj pursued. Dockmaster's Tour. The dockmaster, whose name tag read Preston, was rail-thin and had an expression like he'd just smelled something nasty. If his black jumpsuit was a uniform, it was hard to tell, given its shapelessness and obvious stains. He didn't bother to hide his effort to crane his neck to see into the miner's ship behind her before he refocused his eyes on her and grudgingly offered a hand. "Welcome to Station 35, he said, and disengaged from the handshake like dropping a dead frog. "You've never been here before, that right?" "That's right." He nodded. "Gotta inspect your shit and give you a scan before you come aboard." The miner frowned at him. "You've scanned my ship 8 times already." "And now I'll do it again," he said, smug. She couldn't even pretend to be surprised. Every pissant little pseudo-authority out there had their own way to get their kicks. He didn't have the spit and polish look of the guys who love to give fines. Spit, maybe, but no polish. She guessed he was looking to confiscate contraband, or contraband, in quotes, and sell it off, probably right back to her. Well, he could knock himself out. A few minutes of peering and poking, accompanied by disappointed grunts at each promising and empty hiding spot, confirmed that theory. "Just selling ore?" he asked when he apparently got tired of prying in the... Just selling ore? He asked when he apparently got tired of prying in the cargo hold. "Only thing of value on this heap." "Let me see your claim docs," he said, but didn't sound hopeful. She pulled them up on the cargo area display, showing the orbital path of the loose cluster of rubble she called a living. The dockmaster peered at it skeptically, then punched the numbers into his wrist-mounted gadget. "You've been in range of the station for 4 months now," he said, and gave her an accusing look. "I've been in the field for 6, she said. Hit a good seam, didn't want to leave. Didn't want to deal with self-important jackasses. Didn't want to talk to anyone or explain herself. Didn't want to get in any fights. Uninvited, he stuck his finger into the display and dragged. Station 35's own orbital path showed up green, slower than her patch. "Another 6-month stretch like that'll take you out to 34 next," he said. That's the plan, she thought, unless she could make it 7 months. "Just passing through, I guess," she said aloud. "I'll be out of your hair in no time." She was confused for a second by a flash of hostility before she noticed the thinning hair on top of his head. He didn't say anything, just shut all that down and went on to the galley, peering around her mostly unused cabinets and clean cooking gadgets. He frowned, suspicious.
What have you been eating?
Emergency rations.
Christ, why the hell would you do that?
They're cheap, last forever, and I like them.
Weirdo.
He poked around further, apparently trying to prove that she had some secret source of nutrition, but seemed to get bored and walked straight out again. He spent a couple of disappointed minutes tapping at pipes, then wandered to the upper deck. After the macabre warning sign, the miner had expected some pushback when he saw the rifle over her bunk. He looked at it speculatively.
Looks military, he said.
It is. He eyed it a while longer, ran a finger along the barrel like he was checking for dust, but finally just said in a bored tone,
Don't take it off your ship. Don't sell it to nobody here, neither. Try either one and it's mine.
He peered at the beat-up old sword that hung beneath the rifle in a black canvas-wrapped scabbard. He pulled it a little way out to look at its gleaming, sharp edge, then let the magnetic catches resheath it with a click. He didn't find the more dubious stuff behind the well-hidden panels, and she didn't offer to show him. The plant rooms were more interesting to him. He positively woke up. He craned his neck this way and that, sniffing around. The miner tensed every time he stuck his nose in a bloom and snorted.
The hell are they?
Flowers, she said, and when he turned an annoyed eye on her, he amended that to orchids.
What, do you get high on them? Eat the petals?
No, they look nice.
Hallucinate, you mean?
No, they just look nice. Don't you think so? He grunted and shrugged. Philistine.
There's import restrictions, he said. Can't risk the hydroponics. Diseases, you know. Might have to impound to quarantine.
She bit the inside of her lip. I'm not taking them off the ship. No danger to the hydroponics from here.
Can't be too careful with hydroponics, he said, warming to his subject. Never know what diseases plants might carry. Critters, viruses, could wipe out our food supply.
She let that hang in the air, waiting for him to come out with the bribe demand or make her offer it. Last station had a test, she said. She lied, sorry. Last station had a test, she lied. I gave them a leaf and they had a 50-credit testing fee. He wrinkled his nose and mulled it over.
They must have had fancier equipment than mine, he said. The fee's 100 here.
She gritted her teeth and ignored the bilious surge of disgust rising in her. Any kind of discount for paying that directly? Save you the time of tacking it onto the invoice. He grinned, all yellow in streaks.
That is the discount, lady,
he said, and then dawdled, fondling the leaves and blossoms proprietarily until she paid his damn bribe. He didn't even bother taking a leaf. Apparently satisfied at finally extracting a bit of graft without too much effort, the inspection was unceremoniously over. The miner had to walk fast to keep up with the little toad on his way out. They stopped just outside the airlock, the first step she'd taken onto the station, and she put her thumbprint and signature on the inspection report. It had a lot about the state of her ship's engines, thrusters, and reactor, miscounting the number of thrusters and getting flat wrong her reactor type, and a biological analysis of her ship's air and water, none of which he'd done. It had the wrong date, too. The 200-credit fee was right, though. She winced, but paid.
You staying long?
There was a look in his eye, like there was a wrong answer to that question. No, she said, just long enough to sell off the metal and pick up supplies. O2, water, and fuel. When my business is done, I'll go. He nodded, and she figured she'd given the right answer.
Fuel and air you'll get from me, or you'll sell to the company. Everything else you can find off the Galleria if you're not choosy.
Don't care who I buy from, she said, finishing the process of shutting the hatch and setting the lock, but I prefer bids for the ore.
And I prefer not living in the ass hairs of the solar system. We don't get our prefers out here. You sell it to the company or you haul it away with you. Just make up your mind before I unload it for the assay.
What company's that, anyway?
Anaconda Consolidated. This is their station.
The miner took a look around the cavernous port, with its doubly reinforced bulkheads, 2 armored guard shacks, and a scar on the floor from where a big steel baffle had once blocked direct access to the inner hatch. Looks military to me.
Anaconda leases it, I mean. They run it.
He eyed her sourly.
It's theirs in every way it matters, and don't forget it.
Don't worry, I've got a good memory.
See it you do. You want me to do the assay or what?
She'd dealt with Anaconda before, a couple stations back. They'd been all right, not especially more corrupt or inept than anyone else, but she'd rather have bids. And she'd really rather have a different company to do the composition assay the price would be based on. Still, even with a good whack off the sale price from this single buyer bullshit, it had to be cheaper than the fuel costs to haul it to the next station. And with the patch fees coming due on her claim, she needed cash sooner than she could reach another station. No wonder indie miners were so few and far between. Yeah, all right. She gave his pad her thumbprint, and that was that. They dickered about mass and carbon. She was keeping most of the biomass for plant fertilizer, and he didn't want to bother buying the rest. But it was stupid to dump it, and legally he had to take it, so they settled for 10 credits off the fuel bill, which usually ran to 3,000. The miner reminded herself that she was literally selling shit and stale air, but she still felt cheated as she thumbprinted the pad again. They were done then, but he lingered, giving her that appraising look again.
It'll be a while before I'm finished. If you're bored or looking for some extra cash, old man Feeney can always use someone who isn't planning to stay long.
Someone who might be willing to beat someone else up, or maybe shed some blood, and then be gone before the law came looking. Thanks for the tip, she said, since fuck you, or die in a fire, might have offended the guy assaying her cargo.
Tell him I sent you if you do. Just you remember, he called after her, no firearms.
She nodded, remembering the colorful warning outside and wondering if that was his handwriting. The Substitute Welcoming Committee. The dock main exit released a stale smell of old rubber gaskets and the faint whiff of urine as it opened onto a wide passage that took a right turn. The walls were streaked where condensation had dripped from the vents, and a faded sign high on the interior wall pointed down the hallway with a big blue arrow and friendly lettering that read, "Welcome to Captain John Way Koganusan, Station Number 35. This way to our famous Galleria." Under the sign stood a scrubby kid, probably in her 20s if the miner could still judge, gawking down the passageway. "Hope you like assholes!" someone was yelling, chased by a taller, bald kid in leathers. The kid under the sign stooped to pick up what looked like metal knuckles, made a punching gesture at the fleeing one, and seemed to notice the miner. "Hey, lady!" Her grin showed a broken front tooth. "Ow! Fuck! Ow!" came from away down the corridor. "Nice place you got here," said the miner. The kid looked at her like she was stupid.
"It's a shit pile," said the kid. "But listen, right? We've got everything you could want, right? I know all the best places to get booze and drugs and get laid. I know where to have fun, right?"
The miner glanced at her and believed she knew all the places to get drugs. Pass. The kid's eyes went wide, showing intricate tattoos on the sclera. She'd had money at some point to get those done, but looked to have pissed it away.
Whoa, not so hasty, right? I bet you're here for a fight, right?"
"Wrong."
"Come on, where'd you get those scars in? Don't go working for Feeney, he's a tool. Come on and work for Angelica. Punch bozos, it's fun."
"I'm not here to fight, kid. I don't punch anyone I'm not willing to kill." The kid looked skeptical, but pressed on.
So you're what, a trucker? A miner? Mining sucks. I can get you rich, lady. All you need's a little luck and you'll make bank at Lady Angelica's casino. You want to be rich, don't you? I'm good luck, I am. Not a gambler. Looking for company, then? I bet it gets lonely out there. The miner gave her a level look and bit back a remark. Pass. Taking a step in the direction of the famous Galleria, the miner felt a tightness in her joints as old augmentation implants reacted to the first whiff of adrenaline before she consciously registered the characteristic snick of an old-fashioned switchblade. Don't be like that, the kid was saying, quieter now. I've been helpful, right? At the very least, you ought to give me a tip, lady. The miner turned slowly and saw the kid standing in what she probably considered a fighter's stance, holding the switchblade like a screwdriver. The miner took the knife away from her. Pass. The girl's expression flashed from shocked to angry, and she showed her teeth. Don't start something you can't finish. The miner said, Don't start something you can't finish. The miner said mildly. Give that back, the kid growled. The miner grasped the blade with both hands, poised to snap it, but the kid threw up her palms in surrender. Hang on, that was my grandma's knife. She used that to shiv Rudy Houston, right? Hang on, that was my grandma's knife. She used that to shiv Rudy Houston, right? Much better. See? Her word rhythm makes sense once she get her right accent there. It all makes sense. The miner stared, her brain refusing to engage with that sentence. I'm going to go that way, she said. If nobody follows me, I'll leave it on the deck at the next hatch. Right? The kid nodded mutely, and amazingly, didn't follow. Welcome to the Galleria. The Galleria wasn't entirely the rat hole the miner had imagined. It was a tall atrium in the middle of the station, and its overhead windows had been the eyes of the spider she'd observed from orbit. Back when this had been a military outpost, it would have been two connected decks, a lower area for assembling and organizing, and an upper area for support. She could close her eyes and picture it, complete with Navy ratings and Marines milling around. The upper decking had been sawn away to clear out a big central area like a park under the trio of sun lamps arranged around the windows. The remains of the second floor ringed the space with a deckway and storefronts. Neon lights and animated signs flickered and sent shadows like campfire at the entrances to shuttered businesses, most closed with no more care than turning off the lights. There'd been a tattooist and gene modder, VR rigger, a Fitz's drugs, and a lawyer. The open doors showed that everything not bolted down had been taken, although a number of stripped bolts protruded from the decking, too. The Lady Luck Casino, a bar called Ama no Gawa, I don't know why I misread that. The Lady Luck Casino, a bar called Ama no Gawa, and the security station remained dubiously open on the first deck, and there was a big sign for a hotel called Ad Astra on the deck above. The space in the middle had scattered tables and chairs, a bunch of raised beds hosting some sickly-looking palm trees, and a stage in the center. In some designer's fevered mind, and maybe even recently, it had probably bustled with shoppers and loungers and young people having loud and picturesque fun. The miner could only make out two people, one asleep at a table and clutching a bottle, and the other in a black uniform, dozing in a chair in front of the security station. It was 1100 station time, and the daylights were on, so either the place was seriously night-shifted or just dead. She contacted her ship and asked for a heads-up map. Sorry, boss, they don't have one in the usual place. There's a directory listing, though. Send it, she said, ignoring the sinking feeling and bringing the text up on her heads-up display. Green text floated up her retina, lazily showing a list that was either vastly out of date or just bullshit. 3 ore buyers, wouldn't that have been nice? Even being bogus, though, the listings helped her orient herself a bit.
The Galleria had the 2 rings she could see, full of ghosts of shops, and then straight stubby alleys nominally at compass points with west leading to the port. North, just clockwise from the casino's big neon-lit windows, had a provisioner under the name Anaconda, and she ambled over that way past the drunk. Heads popped up like meerkats as she approached the casino, then settled down again as she passed. She didn't like the odds that they were actually ignoring her, and she walked slowly so she could hear if anyone approached. The provisioner, Anaconda Supplies, bore a sign in the window that claimed to have been rated highly in a customer satisfaction survey, which was just vague and sad enough to be true. The shop inside was tiny, practically a closet. All the actual goods, if they had any, would be tucked away somewhere in the bowels of the station and maybe even in a parking orbit around the rock. The walls were instead coated in ads, a lot of them real paper, for various brands of yeast, feed, Entamo protein bricks, Real Star Chicken, Chikken, which the miner had to admit was actually pretty good, and so on. There was even a big animated ad for France brand oxygen/nitrogen blend. Avec that je ne sais quoi that makes Paris smell like Paris. That makes Paris smell like Paris. There we go. I'll reread that ad once this other ad that decided to pop up on my Twitch feed gets banished. To France. Begone. Go, be banished to Verdun. Verdun. There was even a big animated ad for France brand oxygen/nitrogen blend. Avec that je ne sais quoi that makes Paris smell like Paris. Which she stared at for a while to be sure wasn't a joke, and then still wasn't sure. There was a terminal at the counter facing the shop, and the miner spent a few minutes typing in her short order. It asked for a water order in milliliters, which was laughable. If any station had ever filled a water order to within 10 liters, she'd have been shocked. The provisioner herself appeared from a back room. She was short and skinny, and looked at the miner like she might steal the ads off the walls but for the provisioner's own vigilance. Still, she said hello gracefully enough, and put on a pair of reading glasses to examine the order. The provisioner stared and frowned, then peered at the miner over the top of her glasses.
You've made a mistake.
The miner peered back at her, trying not to loom, but failing thanks to her enormous height advantage. What do you mean?
This order you entered, this says 6-person months of emergency rations.
That's right.
How many people on your ship? There's not much water, and there's nothing else.
Just me. It's what I eat. The provisioner's frown turned into an outright horrified stare.
You're not supposed to live on them. They're for emergencies. It's right in the name.
So, no law against it?
They're...
The provisioner stopped herself, then obviously took a moment to compose and restart.
They're not intended for everyday consumption. They have a bitterant.
I know. I've been living on them. I like it. It's like coffee. The provisioner massaged the bridge of her nose like she was getting a headache. The miner was used to that.
I don't keep much on hand, she managed, and I'm not going to sell you my whole stock. Someone who isn't insane might need a brick or two, she muttered, poking into the air at an interface only she could see. I can sell you 3-person months, she finally announced. That's the limit. I know it's not enough calories for a 6-month span, but I've got 4 blends. I've got flour blends, cricket flour, mealworm flour, lentils, and if you really are a culinary masochist, there's nutrient powder, but you'll need extra water. She frowned at the list. You should carry more water than this anyway.
Got any of that bitterant?
Has anyone told you there's something really wrong with you?
The miner grinned. All the time. The provisioner reset the pad to a catalog, and the miner spent some time poking through the rest of the stock, filtering out anything that wasn't stable for at least 6 months at standard ship storage temperature and pressure, leaving most of their in-stock catalog. Not a lot of turnover, she figured. There was wheat flour, but it was exorbitant and probably rancid. The millet/cricket blend was cheap, but she mostly remembered it for making the shittiest beer she'd ever had, and decided she wasn't that hard up. There was straight-up Jiminy, too, but pure cricket flour wasn't good for much on its own, and she might as well get it pre-mixed rather than try to do it herself and have to replace the ship's air filters. I love that cricket flour is called Jiminy. It's the little things. Also answers one of my first questions when you're having a discussion about world building and you're interrogating a world that someone has built. One of the first things you ask I ask anyway, and I know I'm not alone, is what do they eat? And we're getting a good list of what they eat. It took almost an hour of haggling and poring through the catalog to put together a tentative order. She declined a free 50 milliliter sample of France air, then declined to accept 3 credits to. Sorry. Let's try that again. She declined a free 50 milliliter sample of France air, then declined to accept 3 credits to take a free 50 milliliter sample of France air, then put the whole order on hold while the provisioner finally agreed to see if she could lay hands on more emergency rations.
Just make up your mind soon, the provisioner said when they'd finished. In 8 hours I'm out.
Off duty?
She shook her head. Out? I put in my resignation and I've got a berth rented on that last freighter. I don't mind telling you, this place has gone to shit.
Who'll do provisions?
Not my problem.
Then why don't you just sell me your whole stock of emergency rations?
She shook her head. The people staying here might need them. I owe them that much at least, poor jerks.
The miner considered the doorway and the goons in the casino. Is there a back way out of here? I was getting some looks when I came through. The provisioner looked grim.
Yeah, there's a service entrance. Hook a right to head clockwise. There's an outer ring that goes all the way around, and you'll get to the eastern spur. That'll take you back to the Galleria. Listen, I can't promise it'll be any safer that way.
The miner shrugged. I'm not avoiding a fight for my sake. She slipped out the back entrance and heard a heavy metal kerchunk behind her as the provisioner locked it. The long, curving corridor had unmarked hatchways on either side, lit poorly. It smelled of piss and mold here and there, and occasionally she caught the whiff of blood on the warm, humid air. The place was dead. No footsteps or voices, just the low whir of the air movers, growing to a hiss and fading again as she walked past vents. The remains of a cleaning robot lay against the inner wall as she got to the intersection. It looked like it had been kicked to pieces, with its plastic chassis crumpled, wheels all askew, and the contents of its compartments strewn a little ways. She'd never been the type to romanticize robots, or anything, really, but she felt a pang of something looking at it. Not sadness, exactly, or at least not for the bot. The whole station was starting to grind on her. The eastern spur led right back to the Galleria, as promised, past a sleazy-looking clinic. Sure enough, 3 morons stood just at the entrance to the northern spur where she'd have come out. She stood and watched them for a moment, almost mesmerized by the stupidity, and half wishing she'd come back that way and taught them a lesson. The thought of it made her implants buzz and warm up. She decided she'd rather have a drink, and took a chance on that bar. The sign by the door said, Kenichi Takata, Proprietor. And it was dark inside, but comfortable dark, not closed for business dark. An old guy with wild white hair and a big white beard sat in a corner booth with an empty glass, openly staring at her but not saying anything. The miner wove through the tables and crossed the 2-meter-long stained wood bar and picked the red stool on the far end from which she could see the exits. The taps didn't have any brands she recognized, though she had a dim recollection that the one with the blue diamonds was popular. The back wall should have had dozens of full bottles of liquor, but didn't. There were a few upside-down pint glasses and a baseball bat. There was a doorway behind the bar to some kind of back room, with a split blue and red curtain with fish printed on it hanging halfway to the floor. She planned to give it a minute before calling out for service, but the old guy in the corner booth beat her to it.
Hey, Toccata! Customer!
He was staring down into the glass. He was staring down into his glass by the time she looked, already bored with her. Another old guy with his iron-gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and a fierce mustache poked his head out from the back room. He looked square at the miner and said, "Shit." He disappeared, saying, "No beer, no whiskey, all out."
"I'll have what he's having," she called after him. "He brings his own. Beat him up for it."
The guy in the corner either laughed or wheezed. She couldn't tell which.
"How about a water, then?" "Tap's busted." "Then I'll have a glass full of air. You have that, don't you?"
That was answered with silence and then a sigh.
"Look," said Toccata when he reappeared, "it's nothing personal, but I gotta stay neutral. No side. That means I don't serve your kind. Nothing personal, okay?"
"You don't serve minors?"
"Of course I don't. Oh, hell, you're no miner, either kind."
She was amused despite herself. "Yeah? Where'd I get that 13 tons of nickel iron, then? Did I beat up an asteroid?" He had the good grace to look sheepish, at least.
"No shit?"
"They haven't finished the assay yet." Toccata shuffled over to the taps and filled a glass without asking. He stuck it in front of her with a dull thud that splashed the head over the side, and then put the side of his hand in his mouth to taste where it had run over.
"Sorry, lady, but you got to admit you got tough guy written all over you. No offense."
"None taken. I've been getting a lot of that here."
"Welcome to Poisonville," he said, waving to take in the empty galleria outside. "Population stupid."
The miner hadn't had a beer in 6 months. She didn't keep alcohol on the ship anymore, even when she was flush with cash, and she hadn't been. The amber liquid caught the low light, and all she could smell were citrusy hops. "Mind starting a tab?"
"Shit."
"I'm good for it. Just have to sell that bunch of ore."
"You selling to Anaconda?"
"Nobody else."
"That fucker Preston doing the assay?"
She thought back, failed to remember the dockmaster's name, and figured the answer was, "Yup." Toccata's face twisted in a way that made his mustache bristle.
"Ah, hell. It's on the house. I suppose you want something to eat, too."
"Truly, your hospitality is legendary." She thought about Preston and mentally adjusted down her expected profit from the trip. If she had any other options, she'd consider canceling and moving on. As it was, at least there was beer. Toccata disappeared into the back again, muttering something from which she only caught the word "asshole." She took a long drink from her beer, cold and bitter, and enjoyed the feel of the icy glass in her hand and the faintly sour aftertaste. Civilization had its uses. She heard scraping of utensils on a plate, and Toccata reappeared with a plate of rice and some kind of stew or curry. "I didn't mean for you to give me your lunch." He shrugged.
"Meat's turning on the griddle. Just eat it. It's good."
It was good. There were a few chunks of meat, she couldn't tell what, and had learned not to be picky, and potatoes and carrots with little flecks of ginger. The aromatic steam in the dry station air flooded the space around her, reminded her of busy mess halls full of banging trays and clattering tableware. She found herself eating fast and forced herself to stop and sip the beer so she wasn't wolfing. Toccata just leaned against the back wall and watched her eat, a kind of bemused but satisfied look on his face. He cleared away the plate and the moment she finished. "Best meal I've had in ages," she said truthfully, tossing off the rest of her beer in one swallow. He kind of ducked his head and shrugged, acknowledging the compliment, but she could tell it pleased him.
Hey, how about some for me?
Called the old guy in the corner.
Shut up, Herrera, pay your tab, said Takata without malice. Shut up, Herrera, pay your tab,
said Takata without malice in his tone. Herrera just cackled. Takata returned to cleaning in the back while the miner sat and cooled her heels. No word yet on the assay, so she sat and watched the empty galleria. The vacancy grated on her somehow. She hated crowds, but there ought to have been one. There's a comfortable emptiness, she decided, and then there's abandonment. And this was the latter. A short, wiry guy, pale and balding, appeared from the eastern spur, peering around and then hustling straight across the galleria, weaving his way between the empty tables and making straight for Takata's bar. He was clutching a cardboard bottle under one arm and not really paying attention to where he was going. When he got to the restaurant entrance, he kind of hopped through the door like it might spring shut on him. He started for the bar, then noticed the miner and stood stock still. She was reminded of nothing so much as a startled lizard. "Howdy," she said, nodding and breaking the staring contest.
Hi,
he blurted out. Herrera raised his head in brief interest, then huffed and looked back down at his glass.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Didn't know you had customers, Mr. Tanaka.
Sorry,
Mr. Takata.
Takata had come from the back room and groaned.
Oh, Finn. Hey, Mr. Takata, listen, I know you've got a slump going on. I wanted you to know something.
He scuttled forward and leaned in like he was sharing a secret. Eyes wide, he said,
I have a tequila now.
Takata groaned.
No tequila, Finn. Look, your vodka's decent. Your white whiskey's good. Let's stick to those. If you're hard up, I could stand some more vodka.
Finn drew himself up to his full height, looking offended.
No. I have to diversify, that's all.
Why?
People get tired of vodka.
Nobody gets tired of vodka.
I get tired of vodka,
Finn said, then rubbed the back of his bald head.
Making it, anyway. I guess drinking it's all right.
The miner wondered just how much of his own supply he drank and whether he'd gotten all the methanol out.
Look, Finn,
remember the gin?
Oh, come on.
Takata planted both palms on the bar. Remember the gin?
That's not fair.
It's entirely fair. Finn looked like he wanted to argue the point, but instead waved the cardboard bottle.
You won't try the tequila?
Takata opened his mouth, then gave half a smile.
All right, Finn. She'll try the tequila.
Wait, what? The miner didn't like the looks either of them were giving her. Takata already had a shot glass out on the bar, and Finn got to filling it.
Try it. Free tequila, just like your free beer and free lunch. Tell me how it is, and I'll call it even.
What was wrong with the gin?
Just drink the damn tequila.
Finn held it out with both hands. The glass was full of an oily liquid with a faint yellow tinge. She took it and got it too close to her nose.
Oh, Jesus, is that benzene?
Finn answered too slowly.
No, it's definitely not benzene.
She frowned, her eyes watering. Takata said,
Drink it. What do you have to live for anyway?
She sipped. The taste of pure alcohol numbed her lips, and the tip of her tongue burned. There was a whisper of flavor there that she might eventually have guessed was supposed to be agave, but which she would otherwise have thought was a yeast vat with a bacterial infection. Or maybe scotch made by burning rubber gaskets instead of peat. Keeping her face still, she swallowed the sip and suppressed a cough as the back of her throat caught fire. The vapors crawled up into her sinuses and burned those, too. It wasn't the foulest thing she'd ever drank, but that wasn't saying much. Staring it down, she picked up the shot glass again and tossed the rest back. It took her a second to trust herself to speak. "Not bad," she said, her voice husky. She slid the shot glass down the bar, and Finn eagerly refilled it, splashing. "Give it a try." Toccata looked suspicious, but did. The coughing and spluttering fit was just as entertaining as she'd hoped, and if the look of betrayed injury on his face hadn't started her laughing, Finn's utterly crestfallen expression would have. At least she didn't fall off her bar stool. Herrera hooted and laughed and clapped twice. Finn just stood and looked uncomfortable. He plucked the shot glass from the bar between the thumb and forefinger, sniffed delicately, and drank it. Back to the drawing board?"
Don't pour that shit in the septic system, Toccata coughed. "You'll burn a hole in it and we'll all die."
Finn winced, but took it with grace.
"So, 3 liters of vodka?"
He had to wait for Toccata to stop wheezing and rub the tears from his eyes.
4,
he croaked, showing the count on his fingers.
2 of the white whiskey."
Finn snapped a decent half salute. Sorry. Tim snapped... Finn... Oh, I don't know what's going on. My brain. Finn snapped a half-decent salute and fled. Toccata poured himself a half glass of water from under the bar and drank it all in one go. When the miner finally let out the cough she'd been suppressing, he gave her a venomous glare.
"Not bad,"
he said, his voice dripping sarcasm.
"Didn't say it was good."
She met his level gaze for a few seconds until he cracked up. What was wrong with the gin? Toccata made a face.
"Real gin needs aromatics, or it's just vodka. Trouble is, there's not much in the way of aromatics on a space station, especially juniper. Finn's not the kind of guy to let an obstacle like reality get in his way, so he... improvised."
What did he use?
I asked. He said, "If I tell you, you'll just be prejudiced."
Oh. Belly full and feeling the pleasant edge of a buzz, the miner swiveled on her stool to look out the door. The security guard was still asleep, though the drunk had apparently stumbled off at some point. "So, what's the deal here?" She waved with one hand to take in that scene.
"No deal. The place is dying, and I'm only still here to watch it die because I'm vindictive, stubborn, and lazy. Plus, if I break the lease on this piece of shit restaurant space, it'll cost me what's left of my credit. I was dumb enough to renew it 7 months ago, right before it all really went to hell. Right before it really all went to hell."
"What's killing it?"
"Greed, stupidity, gangsters."
He looked like he wanted to spit.
"You can still get supplies, though, and you can get gone. Around here, those are the only things worth getting."
Thanks for tuning in, Jim Burke. On the shit list. Screwball didn't want to take the ice pack away from his face, but if he didn't, then Ditz couldn't tell that he was staring daggers. So he peeled it off and gave him the full measure of his righteous irritation. It didn't help. Dude was off in his own muddled, stoned, but pissed off little world.
"I can't believe Raj pushed us off like that, man. What the hell, man?"
"Pushed me off," Screwball corrected him. "You fucking ran away, you asshole."
Raj had been enthusiastic in revenging himself, and Ditz had been nowhere in sight.
"Man," Ditz said, "don't be like that. I was going for help, calling in the cavalry."
They'd slunk back to the hotel to report Raj running them off the dock, and Old Man Feeney had gone redline. Screwball should have ratted Ditz out as a coward, but didn't for some reason, so now the worthless little egg fart thought they were friends again. Fucking asshole. Ditz had stolen some ice from the kitchen for him, about the only food in the place, and now they were kicking around the service entrance. In theory, they were on guard duty, but mostly they didn't want the old man to see them while he was still angry. Feeney couldn't take it out on Angelica. If he could, they wouldn't be in that mess, so he'd take it out on them or anyone who looked at him funny. Which meant that in turn, by all rights, Screwball ought to take it out on somebody lower down the pecking order than himself, except nobody actually was lower down than him. Even Ditz had some kind of connections, so that just left him to sit and stew. The hotel's service entrance backed out onto the outer corridors of the station in a ring that went all the way around to Angelica's home base in the casino. Guarding the service entrance was nice and quiet, usually the kind of thing people volunteered for when they wanted to get stoned in peace. After all, it would be stupid of any of her fighters to come around to the hotel, just like it would be stupid of Ditz and Screwball to go around to the casino. But it would also be stupid to assume they wouldn't, because pretty much everyone involved was stupid.
That hurt?
Ditz peered at Screwball's face, getting close enough that Screwball shoved him away.
How high are you anyway?
Ditz considered that, then raised his hand palm down and made a seesaw motion.
We can't let them get away with this, Ditz.
His voice was muffled by the ice, and by not being able to feel his lips, but he didn't care.
If we don't fight back, they'll just cycle us. In the shoot and flush, the whole lot of us. The old man isn't bringing in any money, you know. How the hell is he going to pay us if this drags on, huh?
Man, lighten up. You're new here, right? Look, they push us around, we slap them around. It's all good. You can't take it too personal. A couple months ago, with the real fighting, yeah, that sucked. People actually died. This is nothing. We'll make some extra cash while the old man and the witch blow off steam, then they'll make up and we'll all be buds again. Screwball started to object, but Ditz looked him in the eye, his blown pupils eerie. Seriously, he who kicks your ass today is just gonna owe you a beer tomorrow. Be cool. Doc Mills. After working her budget this way and that, and getting increasingly impatient with the assay, the miner decided that she had the time and money for an overdue visit to the Sawbones. There was a doctor's office right off the Galleria. She'd passed it when she returned along the eastern spur, but the bartender Takata told her to skip him.
He's for the gangs, he'd said, and these days he's usually drunk or stoned out of his gourd.
He'd given her directions down into the back bowels of the station and promised to message ahead. There were stairs at the end of the southern spur. She took those instead of the elevator on principle. Sorry. As she navigated the corridors, she thought back to the same spaces on other stations long ago. She'd worn a uniform then, and fewer scars. Carved into the rock of the asteroid it clung to, Station 35 was divided into hundreds of little squared-off reconfigurable spaces. Not exactly a maze, but not easy to find one's way through without directions. She could tell it had been designed for floor-to-floor fighting, meaning they expected their enemy wouldn't want to seriously damage the infrastructure. The usual plan for taking a space station was simple. Make a couple nice big punctures to evacuate Atmo, and then be patient while all the little pockets ran out of food, water, heat, and air. Accept the surrender or clear out the corpses, then spend weeks bringing it up to working condition again without the benefit of schematics or working knowledge of the systems. Station 35 had been valuable once. The designers had known that an attacker couldn't afford to be patient, couldn't afford downtime. The miner stopped and rested a hand on an access panel. Thin plastic, as cheap as it looked, intended to deter invaders from throwing a lot of lead. make some greedy commander order hand-to-hand fighting, an ugly, bloody rush against defenders who knew they could fix these systems 10 times as fast. Yeah, the place had been something special once, some critical hub. She felt strangely sad at how irrelevant it was now, discarded and loaned out to scum like Anaconda, or so someone else could pay to keep the air on. Maybe it had drifted out of a useful location, or probably the political universe had just moved on without it. It had seen fighting recently, but pathetic street brawls, nothing serious. In a way, that made it sadder. She stopped once on her tortuous route to stare at a brownish-red handprint that someone had failed to scrub off the wall, barely bothered trying. Charming. The place was spooky empty. A couple times she caught a glimpse of someone, always just stepping around a corner. Once or twice a head poked out of a hatchway that closed again. But that was maybe 6 or 7 people on a long walk. Maybe just 1 or 2 keeping tabs on the stranger in their midst. She found her destination down in what must have been the old command structure space, embedded deep in the rock in the belly of a poorly oiled machine, part of a block that had been divvied up into offices and apartments. The seismic rumble of the air movers was palpable down there, thrumming the decking under her feet, only interrupted by the periodic rush of gurgling fluids. The doctor's door just said, A. Mills, M.D., and no credit, which she found oddly endearing. Mills answered the door by intercom, and only when told, "Takata sent me," did he open it. He was like every other doctor on every other station, if heavier and hairier than average. He was brusque and businesslike, which was fine by her, and didn't ask her name. She paid in advance to be stripped, poked, measured, and prodded, told she had high blood pressure for her age, that her false eye needed to be recalibrated, and reminded that her facial scars could be removed for a fee, same as every other doctor on every other station. When she gave him the list of compounds she'd been exposed to over the years, he drew blood and ran the usual tests for the interesting diseases they caused, and thankfully got the same results as always. He also told her that she ought to get her augmentation implants taken out before they screwed up her joints, but unlike most of the other sawbones, he didn't offer to sell them for her, so she figured Takata had the guy right. She lingered after dressing slowly, and finally admitted, "I'd like a supply of sleeping pills, too." He frowned so hard his mouth disappeared into his curly black beard. "Aren't you flying solo?" He was shaking his head already before she finished saying, "Yup. I really shouldn't sell you any kind of sedative. It's not safe for solo spacecraft operation. You know as well as I do how often emergencies crop up." "Oh, that's no problem. It's not for me. It's for my ship." "Your ship?" "Yeah. See? It gets anxiety real bad." "Your ship gets anxiety?" He had a pretty good level stare, she had to admit. "Sure," she said, grinning. "It gets this crazy idea that I'm going to pilot into a rock or something while I'm strung out on lack of sleep. Nuts, right?" Mills stared at her a long time, maybe wondering if he should prescribe an antipsychotic. "You having trouble getting to sleep or trouble staying asleep?" "Both. And yes, I've tried cutting out bright light and blue light and taking melatonin, and I've got a white noise generator, and a pink noise generator, and a brown noise generator. Think of something, and I've tried it. Drugs work." He pursed his lips and studied her face for a while. His mouth moved like he was chewing his lower lip. "You were in the service, and you've obviously seen action." "Not relevant." If he was skeptical, he didn't show it. "Don't pry, Doc. We've been getting along." "Don't pry, Doc. We've been getting along." She gave him a wry smile and raised an eyebrow. He didn't return the smile. "I'd rather give you a sleep replacement." The miner considered mentioning that she'd spent the better part of 2 years on the damn things. She owed a couple of scars to the hallucinations they gave her. "They don't work for me." He chewed a corner of his mustache for a while, then sighed and ran her bank chip again. He gave her a curious look for a moment, but if he was going to ask anything, he was interrupted when the auto farm started chugging. It spat pills into the tin like a slot machine paying out. "One and only one right before bed. It acts fast, but nothing's instant. Don't take it with alcohol, and please, please take them sparingly." She reached for the tin. "Not yet, I'm not done." He punched a second order in, and the auto farm started vomiting again. "This is the antagonist. It's not safe to rely on, but it's better than nothing, and it works quick. Keep it by your bed. Get some sugar pills or something to train yourself to take one when an emergency alarm wakes you up. Don't start taking the other ones until you're confident you're drilled enough to take the antagonist in an emergency. Got it?" The miner bit back the urge to snark. The guy was trying to do her a favor. At least, he was trying to keep her alive, and figured that was doing her a favor. Still, got it. It's starting to get a little expensive. "The antagonist's on me, then. I'll feel better. I think you're not sleeping your way through a collision or raid." Oh, Jesus. "I'll feel better if I think you're not sleeping your way through a collision or a raid." A sleep seemed like the best way to experience those catastrophic events, the miner thought, but said, "Thanks, Doc." "You want to thank me, stay alive. Repeat business, that's the actual sincerest form of flattery." She grinned and thanked him again, and then noticed that she had a message waiting. The assay was done, and the buyer was ready to meet with her. You can't win. The miner had only been sitting in the black faux leather chair in front of the buyer's enormous faux wood desk, staring at the rosy-cheeked little man in his too big suit, for about 40 seconds, before she realized that she was going to get screwed a lot harder than she'd expected. He looked like Santa Claus, but sure as hell wasn't talking like him. "Arsenic isn't necessarily a bad thing in an ore haul, but it's something we'll have to process out, especially in these quantities. Your onboard refinery is new, I know, but it's not configured the way we prefer," he was saying. He'd been talking in that vein for a while and looked very pleased with himself. "Plus, while nickel iron is in demand, as you say, just like any of 1,000 iron ores, the particular isotropic iron you've brought me isn't quite as—" "How much?" she cut in, her voice hoarse. She hadn't lost her temper, not yet. She hadn't lost her temper in years, and this piddly little backwater cheat wouldn't be the one to break that streak. The longer he spewed bullshit, though, the less confidence she had in that. She'd be patient like she'd been trained, but patient only went so far. "Well..." The buyer had an incredibly punchable face, especially with that poor attempt at an understanding expression. Everything that had come out of his mouth had been complete horseshit. He knew it, she knew it, and the smug little son of a bitch knew that she knew it. What he was deciding now was just how little she'd accept without making a fuss. When she'd finally broken off from her patch with 13 tons of metal, she'd calculated the value of her haul at well over 30 grand. He'd probably offer less than 20, the little cheat, and damn her, she'd even take 15. "I think I could see fit to pay 10,000 for the load." She stared at him blankly, and did the only thing she could think of. She laughed. He didn't. "I'm afraid I don't see the humor, ma'am." "Try again," she said. He eyeballed her, and she could practically see the wheels turning. First-timer at Station 35 didn't usually do business with Anaconda, and she'd made the rookie mistake of letting it be known she didn't intend to come back. He was the only buyer in 1,000,000 clicks for the only company buying. He didn't know she was too broke to push on to the next station, maybe, but who out there wasn't? And since Anaconda did the assay, he held the cards and he had possession. Shit, shit, shit. Stupid. She almost couldn't blame him for taking such an easy mark.
I'm afraid 10,000 is the best I can do.
13. 1,000 a ton is still cheap.
Not for this particular isotope.
At least give me back the arsenic. They paid for it at the last station. I can sell it at the next one. He shook his head.
The refining process makes that very inconvenient for this particular form of arsenic. I could do it, but I'd have to pay you less for the nickel iron.
Let me see the assay.
I'm sorry, we paid for the assay, and so it's confidential.
Bullshit. Her heartbeat quickened, and her augmentation implants warmed up, tickled by adrenaline and ready for a fight. She heard the door slide open behind her and 2 sets of footsteps. Heavy guys, judging by the sound and the tenor of the mouth breathing. Just the 2 of them, what passes for muscle on a nasty, corrupt little... She shook her head, forcefully, and the buyer squinted at her. He'd misunderstood the gesture, but she didn't feel like explaining it.
Are you saying we have a dispute, Ms.?
He glanced down at his pad, frowned.
Ma'am?
Damn right! She stopped herself. Something about that phrasing. Disputed transactions resulted in the seizure of disputed goods until the dispute was resolved in arbitration. Seized, in this case, by Anaconda Consolidated. To be arbitrated by Anaconda Consolidated. Son of a bitch. He cocked an eyebrow, daring her to finish that sentence. She took a breath, reminded herself that she wasn't going to lose her temper, that she'd gladly pay 20,000 credits to keep her temper and self-respect, and then shook her head no, because she didn't trust herself to answer right if she opened her clenched teeth.
All right, then,
he said, voice all oily smooth. Such a punchable face, Santa Claus looking or no. Her fuel bill would be about $3,000 on top of twice that much in supplies. $10,000 would leave her a measly $2,000 profit, less than she'd have made selling her blood plasma for 6 months. The patch fees would eat that and her savings both. Repairs and updates to the ship could wait. She could limp back to a paid-for claim on that, and just pretend the last 6 months had never happened, and that her bank account had evaporated. She thought back to the plant room on her ship, put herself there for a moment, just a moment. The thought of tending the orchids, carefully trimming the bonsai, calmed her down. She wouldn't lose her ship, and the plants, and her freedom, just because she lost her temper.
Your claim doesn't seem to be doing you much good. Anaconda Consolidated has a very generous buyout program if you think you might be better suited to a different line of work.
Taking her answer from her expression, he said,
You don't have to accept my offer. I can return the load to your ship for a modest lading fee. 700 credits would cover it, I think. Plus, you'd have to reimburse us for the assay.
Which left her deep in the red. Unable to pay the patch fees, she'd lose her claim. Unable to pay for loaded fuel, they'd impound the ship. She hated herself, but she had to ask.
I suppose I could...
But she had to ask. 10,000's the best you can do?
I suppose I could go higher.
He folded his hands on his desk, looked her in the eye, and smiled.
But I don't see any reason to.
For a brief moment, she visualized herself demonstrating a very good reason. She took a deep breath, decided she'd rather lose it all than make a spectacle of herself like that, and said, All right. He transferred the 10,000 credits and handed back her bank chip.
That's an unusual name you have,
he said conversationally. Yes, it is, she managed, and was up and out of her chair. The muscle had slunk away, probably once it had become clear that they wouldn't be needed, that she'd knuckled under, clearly in fear of them. But the door still closed very quickly behind her, and when she heard it latch, she barked out a single, bitter laugh. A message came in while she was storming down the passageway from the dockmaster. The fuel bill. She swore and opened it. 5,000 credits! She stumbled to a stop and put her hand on the wall. That wasn't the only item. 5,000 for the fuel, and another line item below it. A 500 credit charge for the assay. You can't break even. Takata had actual honest-to-God customers in the bar when the miner stormed in, so instead of launching into the stream of invective she intended to deliver to anyone with ears, she sat herself in the booth in front of Herrera's and sank into an angry funk. In the walk down from the posh offices and residences upstairs, she'd crossed over from being angry at that son-of-a-bitch buyer to being angry at herself. She'd been stupid and naive, and it had cost her dearly. The customers looked and sounded too damn cheerful. Must have come in on that science ship she'd seen approaching. 5 of them, obviously not related, but all looking well off. Nice clothes, well-groomed, expensive smiles. A kid who looked barely out of his teens sported the most ridiculous white fez she'd ever seen. He wore it at a cocky angle and kept finding excuses to tilt his head or turn abruptly so that the gold tassels swung around. The girl he kept making eye contact with obviously found it hilarious.
"You keep looking like that, you'll sour all my beer,"
Takata said. He plunked a pint down in front of her and cut her off.
"You can't pay, I know. It's on me. Or maybe on them if they get drunk enough they can't keep count."
"Thanks," she muttered.
"That bad, huh?"
"Bastards got me coming and going, paying less than a third what the load's worth, then charged me 5% for the privilege, and they're gouging me on the fuel."
Takata winced. "Shit, they're getting greedy. Not enough miners coming through anymore just to skim a little. If he wants to keep Feeney happy, he's got to really put the screws in. Or he's just a bastard, I don't know."
He bounded off to take care of the paying customers, and the miner didn't blame him. She sipped her beer and scowled. It was good beer, and somehow that made it worse. The customers laughed and chattered, and one of them offered a toast.
"To science!"
Left alone with her free beer, "Cheers," she murmured to her unwitting patrons before she took a gulp, cold and bitter and lovely. The miner buckled down to her finances to see just how badly she was hurt. She did the math 3 different ways. The fuel bill was non-negotiable and non-returnable. Damn that little rat. But she hadn't finished provisioning thanks to the emergency rations, and she could alter that. The water wasn't just a drink, it was radiation shielding, and she'd already sold off the used gray water, so that couldn't be cut much. There was room to reduce caloric intake for a couple months and shorten her stay at the patch, maybe supplement nutrition by growing lettuce or something and keeping mealworms. There was plenty of potting soil and leaf litter in the plant room. She'd eaten worse, probably. Even cutting to the bone, though, the math just didn't work. She dipped into savings to pay for the fuel, and that didn't leave enough to both pay the patch fees and also get back out to do any mining. I'm going to try that again. Even cutting to the bone, though, the math just didn't work. She dipped into savings to pay for the fuel, and that didn't leave enough to both pay the patch fees and also get back out to do any mining. She'd have to go straight out and straight back, and she'd lose on fuel even if Station 34 didn't screw her at all. And what were the chances of that? She had to make up her mind on the provisions in a couple hours, and being late on the patch fees was a non-starter. She'd lose her claim in an automated flash, probably to Anaconda, those dirty, scheming sons of... The miner bit down on that thought and sat staring into her empty beer glass. Her chest was tight, she felt acid in her throat, that familiar tingling in her augmented joints, and caught herself getting swept up in the maelstrom of fury and sick dread. She closed her eyes and breathed and put her mind back to the plant room. She pictured each orchid and each bonsai, walked her mind through the chores that needed to be done, and her plans to finally trim the ficus into shape. She needed to be calm and deliberate. Losing her head wouldn't help, just make her feel better. And if she was in this to feel better, then why did she go into mining asteroids in the first place? She might be miserable, but she was free. She sent a message to the provisioner canceling the entire order. No food, no water. Then she stared at the word sent for a long time. She'd burned out on anger. Now she was just tired. She could make the payment. That was all right. She'd keep her patch. It would still be there for her. She just couldn't go there. You can't quit the game. Oh, sorry. The celebrating customers left before too long, or at least before the miner got grumpy enough to go sulk in her ship. They wandered out one by one over the course of an hour. The last one, the kid with the fez, stopped outside the restaurant to chat drunkenly with a tall, good-looking bald dude with some kind of iridescent gene mod at his temples. He looked familiar, but she couldn't place him. He smiled too much to be a local, but hadn't been at the party. They wandered off, leaving the bar empty except for Takata, herself, and the old guy Herrera asleep in his booth in the corner. Takata hummed to himself as he tidied, and when he finished wiping down the tables, she joined him at the bar. "Get a lot of business like that?" He shook his head, his pleased expression turning rueful.
"Never a lot, but used to be more. They're the first smiling faces in here in months. Some kind of research team, I think. They said they stopped in for fuel and water on their way out to the outer belt with all sorts of fancy new equipment. Something about watching a comet hit something big. Scientists, I don't know about them. I have to admire their enthusiasm, though. Even this miserable pigsty rat hole can't drag them down."
He tapped his finger on the bar top.
"I just hope they're careful."
"How so?"
"They talked a lot about their expensive gear and their new ship. I like to hear it, but around this place that's not so smart."
He poured her a glass of water without asking and put it in front of her. She acknowledged it with a nod. "There are a lot of piracy around here?"
"Not exactly. I don't know. Angelica's crew does a lot of salvage, and who knows how much of it is really salvage. You know, if you're looking to make some money, you could do worse than to offer those people a hand. They're academics, ivory tower types. You know, stupid. They could use someone who's been around."
She grudgingly considered it. She also remembered the way they'd looked at her, uneasiness about the scarred stranger, pity at the poor disheveled drunk. She hated the idea of being in close contact with people long enough for a trip to the outer belt and back, especially people that young. She'd never been that young. "What would I do? Tell them they ought to pay me to come along? The best advice I could give them is, don't take strangers on your ship."
"Take your own ship and caravan. Any pirates, they'll maybe think twice about attacking 2 ships.
"Pirates barely think once," she said. She didn't mention that she couldn't leave dock without food or water, and the second best advice that she could give was, don't pay a stranger up front.
Look,
I'm no babysitter," she said, cutting off his reply. "The kind of money I need, there's nothing I could do for them that would justify it. What were you saying before about that pig fucker excuse me. What were you saying before about that pig fucker buyer needing to keep Feeney happy?" Takata's face darkened. He got back to wiping the bar, finding a spot that required him to face away from her.
"Forget it. You want to change the subject, fine, but take pity on me and pick something else."
"The dockmaster mentioned Feeney, too. Said he could always use someone who wasn't planning to stay too long." Takata snorted and seemed to concentrate on that stubborn spot that the miner couldn't see. She was about to ask again when he said,
"It's not Feeney, or it's not just Feeney. I'll tell you if you promise to have nothing to do with him."
I just want to know. I'm stuck here a while and I don't know the lay of the land.
Don't get sucked in. They do that. They suck people in. They chew them up and spit them out. Go babysit instead. It's healthier.
Tell me about it. He twisted the rag in his hands, staring down as he wrung it this way and that.
Old man Feeney, John Feeney, he runs the Hotel Astra on the upper level up there.
He pointed off to his right.
It's a front. He's a crooked old gangster. Smuggling, drugs, gambling, porno, VRs. He's got his fingers in everything. That buyer, Gordonson, Feeney owns him. Dockmaster, too. The two of them screw over the miners and traders, and Feeney gives them cover and launders the cash. Gets a big piece in return. He's a mean old bastard.
The miner grimaced, remembering the muscle in the buyer's office. Sucks. Hardly unusual, though. Half of these far-out stations have organized crime running things, and the rest are just disorganized. Never been screwed like that before. Never seen a place this dead before. Takata shook his head sadly.
It didn't used to be this bad, not when it was just him. He's a bastard, and he's skimmed and strong-armed, but he knew what side his bread was buttered.
Yes, that is what it says.
But he knew what side his bread was buttered, and that was keeping things running. Keep everything profitable, so there's plenty to skim and nobody minds much.
Someone new horn in? He made a face.
Not exactly. He screwed up. A long story, but about 6 or 7 months ago, one of his lieutenants, a real piece of work named Angelica Del Rio, she and her brother got a bunch of his goons together and tried to rub him out and take over. Everything went to shit. He was tougher than she thought, and had more friends than she thought. Feeney and his granddaughter fought her off, but couldn't put her down either.
The miner considered that. Aborted coups usually left both sides weak, made everything worse.
Angelica pushed out Mr. Shine and took over the gambling operation, which was a big hit to the old man. Anyway, it was open war there for a while. Bunch of people killed. Drove away all the sane people and most of the business. After that, this place has been a magnet for every low-life pissant crook in a billion clicks who's looking for a fight and some cash.
Who's this Mr. Shine?
Big guy, like to walk around in a tux. Can you picture that, a tuxedo in this dump? He ran off below decks, tries to keep the fighting away from the water and air so we don't all die. Bunch of people went down there with him, call themselves Morlocks because they keep stuff running, more or less. He's corrupt as hell, don't get me wrong, but he's got sense enough to keep his head down. He's got some kind of, I don't know, some kind of black market going.
He looked bashful for a moment, glancing in Herrera's direction, and the miner guessed he had more direct knowledge of that than he let on. The miner scowled. Why doesn't the station master do something about these assholes?
I don't know. Hey, Herrera, why don't you do something about these assholes?
Go shit yourself.
See, that's why.
The miner did a double take. Herrera was awake in the corner, stock still and staring at a point on the table just past his glass. He had a nice suit on, she suddenly noticed, or at least it had been a nice suit months ago, before being rumpled and spilled on and slept in. Shave that crazy beard and cut that unruly ball of hair, and he'd look a lot younger, maybe mid-50s.
It's not his fault,
Takata said softly, a pained look in his eyes.
Anaconda runs this place, and their lousy company rep. Herrera got shipped out here by the government to keep an eye on their property, but he can't actually do anything. The government doesn't give a damn as long as the station's in one piece. He fired the dockmaster, but the company rep has to approve a replacement, which she won't, so the acting dockmaster keeps right on ripping people off. Every couple weeks, Herrera fires him again, on principle like, and the evil bastard just laughs.
Corrupt, thieving son of a hemorrhaging leech,
Herrera contributed.
Whoremongering shit whistle. Just fuck that guy.
Herrera!
Takata scowled at the miner.
See? You get him all worked up and he starts saying the fuck word.
She offered an apologetic shrug.
Oh, and it gets better. When the fighting got real bad, I'm talking people getting killed right in the Galleria here, the old security chief getting her head blown off. Herrera tried to get Anaconda's contract yanked, bring the government in to clean house. So the company rep brought in private security. This shithead Tom McMasters came in with a bunch of ex-soldiers.
I'm losing it. Sorry, give me a sec.
He knocked heads for a while and threatened to space anyone who showed a gun. That was good. Then he decided all that was for chumps, and he made deals with both sides. They pay him off and keep their fights quiet, so there's no excuse to kick Anaconda out, and he doesn't pick sides. That's his headquarters right on the Galleria. Lazy jerks barely even patrol anymore. I don't serve any of those sons of bitches either.
Who do you serve?
Shut up.
The miner craned her head to see a black-armored figure sleeping in a chair out front. Maybe the same guy, maybe different shift. There was a stun baton dangling from his hip. Apparently they were serious about the no firearms thing. Or maybe he was a feckless idiot who'd shoot his toes off.
It's the goddamn again stables,
Herrera growled.
a festering abscess full of villains and coprophiles.
Takata gave him a dirty look, but didn't seem to find fault with that assessment.
So you got Feeney up there,
the miner mused aloud, and Angelica over there, and McMaster's in the middle pretending to keep the peace. All nice and balanced.
Takata snorted. We're all royally boned, sure, but we're balanced.
The miner looked at the down-and-out station master. She'd never seen a more despondent expression in her life. You want me to do something about it? Herrera turned his bloodshot eyes to her and stared hard.
Don't toy with him, Takata muttered. He doesn't deserve that shit.
Herrera heaved himself shakily out of his booth. He pointed at her as he advanced, stumbling, glaring from under the stringy mass of wild salt and pepper hair.
I'll pay you, he rasped. I'll pay you 100,000 America Bank credits if you kill every last one of those filthy motherfuckers.
Herrera, don't listen, you. He doesn't have 100,000 credits. He doesn't even pay his tab.
The miner scratched her nose, staring out at the neon-flickering Galleria. She saw the lights had a pattern if she watched them long enough. Left, right, center. Back and forth went the red glow, like a dancing flame. Guess I better go introduce myself. And that is where we will call it for today. Because I think it's an appropriate spot to end for now. Also, I have things I gotta get done. Alrighty. Where did I put my bookmark? I put my microphone on my bookmark. That's where I put my bookmark. Sorry, it's early days jitters. We'll get back into it. So yeah, with that, we have our start. We are going to go places. It is a longish book. It's longer than I ever think it is, but it goes quite quickly. It's a fun one too. A fun little romp. All right, let me put another bookmark here to cover the end point. There we go. And, tentatively should be free tomorrow as well. We'll take it as we go. If I find out otherwise, I'll leave a love note in the Discord. Otherwise, we'll see. Tuesday, I think, is out, and I think Wednesday's a no-go as well. We'll see about Thursday, Friday. I have to play this week by ear due to lack of information. So we'll go from there. Anyway, thanks to everyone who tuned in. It is good to be back. It was relaxing. I will go and find... they have a map of the layout of the station. It's not terribly detailed.
That's the wrong book. That's right. Grab the other book you were going to do. So, for background, I was going to... I had a coin toss. Yeah, here we go. I had a coin toss as to whether I was going to do this or Alien Clay by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And I wound up going with this one because of the coin toss, which is fine. I'll do Alien Clay next, probably. We'll go from there. Yeah. So, it's good to be back. Let's see what I've got for comments that got left. I think there were a bunch. I saw the number 9+ pop up. So let's see what we got. Visual Notion 3957 comments on one of the Greggans. I can't quite tell which one that is. Is that Diaspora? No, I haven't done Diaspora yet. They commented, a comment for support. Appreciate it. Gow of Ball. Gawolf Ball? I'm not sure. Commented on Burning Chrome. Listening through a couple of your Burning Chrome reads, and I can say, as a longtime listener, you were firing on all cylinders during these. Forgot I was listening to clunky old Frag for a minute. Sounded legitimately professional. Well, that's good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Go Wolf Ball. With Hyperion BEP Raphael commented, my brain is melting with all this Keats talk. Also for Hyperion, Ali Azi 8727 comments, thanks to you, I usually like Hyperion tales, but this chapter is unbearable to follow. So, you're welcome? Question mark? I think they're complimenting me, or they're damning me with faint praise, or they're saying I ruined it for them. Oops. You know, there is an actual official audiobook out there. I would recommend that. BEP Raphael, though, follows up with the finale of Hyperion, saying, well, here I am a month after I started reading this, with you, Mr. Frag, with tears in my eyes, with the end of this marvelous story. If it wasn't for you, I'd not have finished it, so thanks, sir. I will take that. We'll take that. On Snow Crash, Laplore comments, I didn't realize I worked for the federal government, she says, as she recalls spending the precise amount of time required to read a new process for work. Yeah. Listened and witnessed. I know that feeling. Let's see. So Aliazi was in fact complimenting me. I just don't know how to read. He says, thanks for your work, mate. I enjoyed incredibly the start of Hyperion. A bit less excited by the end. Hope this fall of Hyperion gains momentum. It's a different book for sure. And then the Endymions are kind of like straight road trip, I guess. Mostly straight road trip until they're not a straight road trip. It's complicated. They're pretty good. You'll get there. And Jakey Pakey says for, I think it's Distress. Yeah, it's for Distress. I think a significant portion of the story was cut out. The last thing I heard was he was on a boat with the AC people who were explaining how the TOE would end the universe. Uh-oh. That is Distress Part 8. I will have to look into that. I'm hoping I didn't just... It could have been a skip around. I don't know that particular book super well in my head. I might have, like, misordered them in the playlist. I'll double check that. Let's see. Story time. Distress. 7, 8. Aha! I think I might have accidentally flipped one of them around. It's possible. I think I've got it covered. I think. I have to check to see which one he commented on. Because I don't have them listed as part 1 and part 2. I'll have to check in on that one. I'm thinking that's probably okay. Maybe. But I will have to double check them. It might be that I did have like a technical goof and then had to fix it. There is a second one labeled Part 8 that is longer, so it could be that I got it fixed there. I'm not sure. I'll find out. Anyway, I've got to find an EPUB version of Red Noise so I can extract that map. Anyway, thanks to everyone who tuned in. I appreciate you all. If you're listening to this after the fact, I appreciate you all. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to these. I will, I'll get a, in 2 weeks, I'll get a updated playlist with Red Noise and everything at the end of the month. I try to do that every month. Anything else salient? Not really. I guess during my 2-week sabbatical, I did get a bunch of reading done. I read through Shroud by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which was phenomenal. Very blind sight. Very, very blind sight. With other things going on. I haven't read much by Adrian Tchaikovsky. He's only a recent discovery for me. I first learned he even existed with Alien Clay, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I also read Exordia by, what's his name, Seth Dickinson, which I don't think I could reasonably describe to anyone in a timely fashion. Suffice it to say, it is rare that there is a book that not only keeps me enthralled every step of the way, but at no point was I sure I knew what the next thing was going to happen was. I was never sure what was going to happen next. That book had me floored the whole way through. I was just like, I have no idea what's going on. I have some idea what's going on. I have no idea where this is going. Very well done. Actually has a pretty good like one-liner description of, and I'll get to that when we get to that book. I might fast track that one to do that one this year. There's a pretty good one-liner he has in there that I found appropriate to the book, but we'll get to that. What was it? I've got it. I jotted it down, as I sometimes do. Yes, on page 294. Do you know what people call something that hints at structure and pattern, at no ability, but also constantly surprises you? And the answer is beautiful. And by its own definition, Exordia, therefore, is beautiful. I had no idea what to expect at any given moment. It felt like a book that was like kind of constantly reinventing itself and also kind of upping the stakes at every turn, but doing so in a way that felt intelligent and reasoned and well thought out, in ways that other books that have tried that do not. Compare contrast to, what was it? I think it was Battle of the Linguist Mages, which I think was one of the most disappointing books I'd read in like a decade. The most disappointing book I've ever read since Free Chocolate, unfortunately, which I have nothing nice to say about, because that one has a squandered premise. Battle of the Linguist Mages isn't so much a squandered premise as it feels sort of try-hardy, and you guess where things are going way in advance of them happening. Like, I had a pretty good mental blueprint of how the book was going to pan out within about, 50 pages. And it wound up being spot on correct. Or nearly correct. It wound up trying to juke those towards the end and then, like, realigned, and it was like, oh, you had me going for a minute. It's kind of bad when they, like, introduce a character and you're like, oh, this person is clearly working with the hashtag resistance. And then they say, we're working with the resistance. We're literally called the resistance. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're good. They do that like 100 pages later, and I almost cried. Not recommending those books, and I will not read them on stream, mostly because I don't have my copies of them anymore. I was like, nah, we're good. That's enough time and space wasted. But we have many good things we'll read this year. Hoping I'll get around to some Alastair Reynolds, actually. I think we could get around to some Alastair Reynolds this year. Do want to do some Bert Cole as well. He's not, strictly speaking, sci-fi, but he's something different. And there's one or two others that I want to throw in there. We'll see. We got time. Oh, yeah, I do want to do The Mountain Under the Sea as well by, what's his name? Ray Naylor, who I haven't read anything else by. I should get around to looking some of that stuff up. Anywho, I will see you all later, and thanks again for tuning in. Stay safe, stay sane, stay cool or toasty as your geolocation and preferences permit, and be decent to each other, as ever. Until next time, toodaloo.